Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am Phil Svitek, and today I am joined by Charles McCaughan, who you may have seen on various episodes of mine. He is a therapist, as I call him. That's not his preferred term, but I'll let him talk about that. But just to set the stage, today we're going to do something a little bit unusual, and that we're going to take a movie, in this case, Life of Chuck, which is ironic because his name is Chuck. Both the character as well as Charles McCaughan. And we're going to dissect it through the lens of me as a filmmaker, Chuck as a therapist, but also Chuck not only is a tremendous therapist, but he's also has a storied life as an actor before he became a therapist. And we'll touch upon that as well. But allow me to introduce Chuck McCaughan. And for the purposes of this, I will call you Charles to not confuse it with Chuck from the movie.
Okay. That's
How
good.
you doing today?
Doing very well, thank you. Looking forward to
Um,
talking with you about this film.
yes, I'm excited too. And just before we dive into the movie, have I misrepresented anything about you that you think might be of importance for the audience as we jump into this movie?
Not really, except for the first part of my life, for the first 42 years of my life, I was an actor, a member of all the unions, and I get a Screen Actors Guild pension. And at a certain point in time, I just realized I wasn't very happy doing that. I was basically doing it because my mother had been an actress before she married my father, who was a doctor and a surgeon, and she whined all through our childhood, if I hadn't married your father, I would have been a star. So she had three sons, and she was dead determined that one of them was going to be an actor, and that was me. I suckered into it, and so that was my whole life. I mean, I thought about doing a lot of other things. I wanted to travel internationally, doing something internationally. I was a pilot in high school. I wanted to fly. I wanted to be a pilot, and but nothing was going to compete with the fact that to get my mother's love, I was going to be an actor. So I've got a pretty wide understanding of the industry.
Very good. And yeah, so you bring that very rare kind of intersection of a lot of this. And so I'm looking forward to it. I just want to start with like the basics. And by the way, for anyone watching, we obviously will be diving into spoilers. So we're going to make the assumption that you've seen the movie. Whatever you thought, good or bad, we're going to kind of talk about it more from a neutral lens. But I would say that you and I both did enjoy it very much so. So I want to start there. Your emotional resonance, as it were, having seen the movie? Was it like joy, grief, maybe a mixture? Like, what did you walk away with?
Well, yeah, it was a mixture. It was joy. It was hard moments at times because a lot of this film is about the decisions we make in life, and we've all made some, and I made some that midlife turned and went another direction out of necessity. But uh, I love this film. I think it is a type of masterpiece. It truly is an art film, and Mike Flanagan, the director, and did he write it as well? The screenplay?
Maybe the screenplay, but it is obviously based off of a Stephen King short story. Yeah, so he did write it. The Life of Chuck is a Stephen King work, and he's adapted other Stephen King novels, but more in the horror space. So for him to do something like this, which not exactly like a Stand By Me or even Shawshank Redemption, but certainly not horror, right? So it's interesting to see Mike Flanagan playing in this space of a Stephen King, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. I mean, some reviewers have said it's the best Stephen King film ever made, and I would have to agree with that. When I was in the theater, it was for the most part, not totally, but for the most part, it was middle-aged older people. And I really would like to see more young people, yourself excluded, who've seen it, see this film because I think it's that important. Um, it's beautifully done. It's The casting is immaculate. And virtually everyone in that film on the scale of known actors and non-known actors were unknown actors, and the casting was amazing. It was
Yeah.
brilliant.
So I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, I went into this movie pretty blind. Like I'd seen maybe a trailer here and there, but it really didn't tell you much. And I loved how it just unfolded, and I went with the uncertainty of it. And I know I had like pitched you of like, hey, go watch this movie. But I'm wondering, did you like how little or more than that did you know heading into this?
Say that again?
Like, how much knowledge of what this movie was really about did you know, other than, that it was probably going to be about some guy named Chuck?
That's all I knew. I didn't know anything else. I'd never read the novella or the short story. But I think that it entertained me. It was called The Life of Chuck at first. And then I realized that Stephen King named the character Chuck because this is an everyman film. And if he'd have named it, Chuck River Phoenix, some people might have gone, or whatever. But it's about all of us. So every one of us is Chuck.
Absolutely.
I
And
think
what specifically, like, if you have to, like, why do you say that? What about Chuck is emblematic within all of us?
he's a sort of average guy, and Chuck is kind of average name from my generation, certainly. Um, so we're all Chuck, and this is the story of our life. Um, as one critic called it, a life-affirming masterpiece. I mean, it is. It's about life. It's Mike Flanagan is pretty famous for if not horror films, somewhat scream films, And I don't see this is in that genre at all. I mean, it's Stephen King, so it's a little strange, and they shot it back to front, of course, I thought was brilliant. I just think the whole thing, the choreography, I can't say enough about this film. It is quickly becoming one of my favorite films of all time.
Yeah. And, like bringing up the working in reverse, right? Many people kind of use the idea of like imagine yourself on your deathbed to figure out, okay, what would you want your eulogy to be? What would you want your legacy to be? So you can essentially have a roadmap. And you and I have done offshoots of that sort of exercise where it's like, what's your purpose? What's your line on a tombstone, things of that nature. So I'm wondering yeah, like the weight of that choice to work backwards, both from a storytelling perspective, but also just, yeah, the weight in terms of therapy and how that can be sort of a guiding light for people's lives.
Well, it's not a musical, you know that, but it does have at least three big dance scenes in it. And again, the choreographers and putting that together was amazing. So I think it's a metaphor that life is a dance. And
Mhm.
the other big thing that he brings up is math, that everything is math, even the beats of a dance are math. Um, so this is our dance. And we choose what we're going to do. And often we choose something that doesn't really ring our bell and get our coconut, and that's okay. I'm an example of that, I unbeknown to me, you know, from the time I was 5 years old, and my mother had me on a stage. So right up to 42, and I just said, you know, uh, I got to walk away from this because I was in therapy at the time, and my therapist said to me after a very significant dream I had on Thanksgiving morning, and I had a session that day. He said, "Now I understand why you hated auditions so much." And I thought, "What? I didn't even know he knew I hated auditions." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because if you got the part, your mother loved you, and if you didn't, she didn't, over and over and over again." And I looked at him and I went, "That's it. I'm out of here. I did not really choose this for myself." So that comes up in the film too. I mean, with the young Chuck, whether he's going to follow a life in art and creativity and dance, or he's going to listen to his grandfather and realize that the whole universe is math, which it is. I mean, in a sense, it is because um, math is even relevant to the length of our life. And, there's that big sign that says, thanks, Chuck, for a beautiful 39 years.
37 years. Yeah.
Nobody knows how much time is on their dance card. Nobody. Nobody that dies in a car accident, nobody that dies in an industrial accident would get in that car that day or go to work that day. We like to think, and I think when you're really young, you think you're going to live forever. And that's another poignant thing about this film is that after Chuck's grandfather dies and he opens that door to that upper room and there's nothing there and he turns to walk away and then he hears that heart monitor and he looks back and there he is, identifiable by that scar on his hand. And I think the dialogue at that point was uh, there was no way to determine how old the man laying in that hospital bed was. But that's the moment when Chuck realized it was him and that he went from a transition of probably thinking he was going to live forever to the transition of another big theme in this film, which is now the waiting begins. Now, that may seem dark to a lot of people, but I could ask you, you're many years my younger. I mean, is there ever any sense that, we're all going to live and we're all going to die?
Yeah.
Certainly at my age of 74, I can see the end of the runway, or kind of, and there is a kind of waiting now. When will this life, this wonderful life, hopefully
Yeah.
be over?
To borrow another Stephen King quote, it is that sort of get busy living or get busy dying
Yeah.
aspect, right? Because I mean, we're all the human condition is terminal. As you said, we don't know when necessarily, but it comes. And unfortunately, oftentimes it isn't fair, right? Young kids die all the time from diseases or whatever else. Some people that, many would claim that weren't supposed to live because they were bad people live to be, 120 years, let's say, right? Like there's, it's just, I don't think it's necessarily random, but it is random to us. Um, and for me, it's something that I do kind of grapple with in the sense that I think there's still a sense of responsibility. I don't think like obviously I want to see the world and travel things, but at the same time, if you ask me like if I died today, would I be at peace with everything that I've done? I'd say, yeah, I would. Of course, there's creative projects and other things that I would still love to get to do. But in the pursuit of that, if today was the day, it's like I've done everything. I would have no regrets because I've been pursuing those things to the best of my abilities at each juncture thus far. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think this movie is about perspective and perspective shifts. One of the multitudes that the movie presents is yeah, we don't know when we're going to die, but at the same time, I love, if you took the human, if you took the history of the whole universe, and put it in a calendar, like everything else that happened, I forget the exact time frame, but essentially, like all of humanity has been living for like a day or week tops, whatever it is. So, and to think of my life within the, and I think we like to make ourselves bigger than we are. Um, but I think we do need sort of that humility of certain aspects. And even to borrow from the latest Jurassic World Rebirth, it's not a spoiler, but there is a line in there of like, dinosaurs lived for 100 million something years. Humans have, lived for a fraction of that.
Actually,
And you're like, all right,
250 million years, I think.
yeah. So, and we're already like starting to seemingly, right, whittle away ourselves, right? So who's really the smarter species, ultimately, Like, so I don't know. Yeah, there's just a lot to think about, and I don't think the answers are easy, but I think that's part of the fun.
Yeah, I mean, he brings up the dance scenes, which I think is a metaphor that life is a dance. And also the Carl Sagan calendar of the universe, each month stands for something like 30 billion years or something. And we're in the last second of the last hour of December 31st.
Yeah.
Now, I find this really interesting that this film would come out. I'm not sure how long ago Stephen King wrote it, but this film would come out at the advent of AI, because that in the scientific and tech world is considered maybe the greatest threat that mankind has created for himself ever. A machine that can think for itself and is doing so already, So, and everybody loves the miracle of it and the fantasticness of it, but there's a lot of controls that need to be put on it. Um, anyway, there's a lot that can be said about that, but um, there's a scene when the teacher, the black man that's the teacher, is, and all the internets are going down. Everything is crashing. Things that, caveman would not ever think about, and we are so dependent on. And people are hysterical. They're committing suicide. There's volcanoes in Germany. California slipped away into the sea. The planet is going through something. Um, but there's a scene where he's in his house, which is not the house that Chuck lived in. That, according to the script, that house was sold, demolished, and there's an apartment building there now. So even when you see the outside shots of the teacher, the black guy, walking out of his house during this chaos, these sinkholes in the middle of the city, and I mean, people walking around like zombies, the people at the hospital being called the suicide staff, or the how upset people are by all that. And then there's a scene where he's talking to his ex-wife on the phone, and they're talking about the Carl Sagan calendar. And I don't know if you remember this, but he walks around the corner into a hallway with that very distinctive wallpaper that was in that house where Chuck lived with his grandparents. And there was that door with that lock on it that we will come to see many times. And we go, wait a minute, he doesn't live in that house. So why is that scene there? Well, that scene there, I think, is if you want to know what's going to happen at the end of Act Three, which comes first, is this all going to turn around or is it not? I think the indicator is it's not. This is the last day, the last second. How long that might be, it might be 30,000 years. We don't know, but we are quickly kind of bringing about our own extinction. And that's why I think that you see him in that setting in a house that he didn't live in, but Chuck did and his grandparents did. And there's that room where they could see the future of someone's death.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a movie that rewards second viewings. Sadly, I have not had that opportunity. I would love to now, obviously, having seen it, go back and see all those little Easter eggs and, foreshadowings visually. Um, One of the things, I don't know why it stands out, but remember when the teacher is speaking with one of the parents, and the parent is just so hung up on, there's no porn, man. And the teacher just gets, and I don't know, it just felt like such a true human moment of like, in spite of everything happening, like it's like, okay, I'm willing to accept this, but can't I just get like, and I think we all try to do that in our own way of essentially negotiate with the universe of like, listen, put me through hell, put me through whatever, but can I please just get this one tiny thing? And as you like to say, when you argue with reality, you will lose 100% of the time.
Those are very interesting scenes at the opening of the third act, which comes first, with that teacher interviewing these parents about the problems of their children in school. Now that the internet's going down, there's no, the cell phones are acting up, and what's interesting about those interviews is that the parents hardly even talk about the kids at all. They're talking about their problems. The guy can't watch porn anymore, and the man's wife left him, and maybe she'll come back, but probably not. And then the teacher leans back and laughs at the end of that, and they both laugh. But what about the kids? We haven't talked about the kids and their grades. I found that very, very interesting. Um, how fundamentally self-involved we are, you know. And
Yeah.
yeah, another thing in that film was the reoccurrence of people coming inadvertently across each other, crossing each other's paths. You don't ever see Chuck in the classroom with that teacher, the black guy, because there's another teacher there too. Uh, but you see him walk by the door. And also when he's dancing with the girl in that dance scene, the teacher is there and he's walking out with a guitar or something. It was a great job, And also when he's going to see his ex-wife, there's that girl on roller skates, and he stops and talks to her and comforts her in the night. I'm here to go see my ex-wife. Oh yeah, I know her. Um, and then you see her again skating past the area where the girl that was drumming, and they were dancing in that square. She skates past there. So there's all these inadvertent passings in the night of people that are interwoven into the story. And that's very much like our own lives,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
And the funeral director as well, that he walks with that night. He's the same funeral director that, as a teenager, he buried his grandfather. And we could assume, if that film went on any longer, that he'll also bury Chuck. And he talks about, this gift that his grandfather had, that he could see things happen before he wanted to be a meteorologist and work on the news, the funeral director. But he said he knew this one guy that knew the storm was coming 2 weeks ahead with no satellite information, no nothing. He said he just had a knack for that I didn't have. And he said, your grandfather had that knack. Well, apparently, when Chuck finally inherits that house and opens that room, that pinnacle, that room in the house, and then sees himself in there, he has that quality as well. And it's a gift. You have gifts for certain things, and you don't have gifts for others. And the other thing is when he went to find out how his grandmother died to the girl in the grocery store, she said, "Well, that's pretty gruesome for you to be asking." He said, "No, this was my grandmother. I want to know." And so she takes him over to where she fell against the bread and knocked it all down. And she said she pretty much knocked everything on the shelves down. And Chuck says, as a young adolescent, he went, "I already knew that." So it's so interesting that it's appealing to that part within us that we already know. We know we have a gift for something or we don't. We're doing it because somebody else wants us to do it or we don't. And I'm not saying that there's any wrong decisions. There's only consequences for choices. But those where he learns to dance in that group in school, and then at the prom, at the party, after talking to his grandfather about being going into math and accounting, he doesn't want to dance. He's making excuses about his leg and all that. And we're all sitting there in the audience. I'm sure you were too. Oh no, don't do this. Don't, you've got to dance. You're so good at this. You've got to do it. You've got to dance with that girl. And then he just keeps saying to the teacher, no, if I have a bad leg, she goes, uh-huh, yeah. And then he finally goes outside and looks up at the stars. And he's wearing glasses. And the older Chuck that dances in the town square was also wearing glasses. And at one point he stops dancing and he kind of braces him. Everybody looks at him, are you okay? And he goes, no. And he takes off his glasses. He says, it's just my glasses. And there's that same matching moment when the kid goes out of the prom and is out in the night air. And you're thinking, don't let this night go by without you doing this. You've got it. I mean, it's so beautifully wrought with tension for all of us. You ask me to identify.
Yeah.
No, you've got to do this. You have a gift. You've got to do this. And then he takes those glasses off and sticks it in his pocket as the young Chuck. He walks back in and dances. I just found the direction just amazing. The performances are a reflection of that.
Yeah, no, it's truly wonderful. And when we watch it initially, we get Tom Hiddleston doing the dance in Act Two, the middle, and it's like it's a novelty, right? And as I'm watching it, A, I'm thinking, wow, he's good. So how did he get so good? B, oh wow, okay, this is a very long scene. We're just staying with it. We're just gonna keep on dancing. And then the reveal happens of how he learned to dance. So I have a couple of things
Yeah,
regarding this, and you can take them in any sort of order you would like. The first being, uh, I appreciate how no one really pressured him ultimately. Like they saw he was making those excuses, and it
hmm,
was one of those moments where the guilt of his lie they knew was enough to just kind of potentially change his mind. They didn't necessarily know that he would do this,
right,
uh, but that was a part of it. No one said like outright like, "Hey, kid, you have to do this" or whatever.
right, right,
And I appreciated that there was also someone on the hook, meaning the girl. Like the girl loved to dance in many ways equally as him. We don't know as much about her, obviously, but she liked to dance with him because he was an equal partner. I mean, granted, he might, he probably would say he's better than her, but like that's the fun of it is that you have a partner in life to dance with. And I also appreciate that sort of duality that like it was for her, which some might argue is not a great reason, but also as much as it was for her, it was also obviously very much for himself. So that's kind of part and parcel of one aspect. But the greater aspect that I also want to touch on that I found fascinating, because through our work, um, we explore where certain choices and belief systems and all that comes from. And while a lot of things tend to happen at earlier ages, right? A lot of books will talk about, everything happening before you're 7 or by 7 around that age. You don't tend to buy into that. And you've seen things that like have been formative in adolescence, or even potentially in this case, like Chuck's, well, he's not there towards adulthood, but he's in between teenage years to almost adulthood. And this is obviously a very formative thing. So I want to get your perspective on, the ability for moments to just affect us in such a great way when conventional knowledge tells us like, hey, by the time you're 7, you're essentially all your beliefs, what good or bad, are formed, and then you're either getting rid of them or changing them.
well, yeah, and there's that beautiful moment when he says not only to the girl, "I've hurt my leg. I'm not going to dance," and she doesn't believe him. And then the teacher that conducts the dance after school dance program, she comes over and she's like, okay, all right. Well, I've seen a lot of people get hurt before, and they start protecting this. I'm not sure that that's the truth, and which is really important because as she walks away from him just before he goes outside, She says, if you don't want to do this, like you said, and no one's going to force you to do this, but at least tell her the truth.
Yeah.
And that's, again, it's so beautifully interwoven because that's what his grandfather, played by Mark Hamill, my God, the best performance of Mark Hamill's life. I mean, if you hadn't told me it was Mark Hamill, I wouldn't know it was Mark Hamill. And he does such a beautiful job. And when he's trying to make a case for math, he says, math can do a lot of things. It can be creative, it can be art, but one thing it can't do is it can't lie. So you have that connection once again.
Yeah.
Don't lie, at least tell her the truth. And that's, again, about math. And the length of our lives, that's all math too. There's a number on our dance card, as I often say in therapy. We all have a different number on our dance card, and there it is. There's the dance card. There's a number, and none of us know when it's going to be. You could look at this and go, "Wow, this is all pretty depressing," but it's not, because it's why I would like to see more young people see this, because now is the time. So when you're picking careers or whatever, turns you on, be truthful about that with yourself. And don't just go along with your programming and your domestication or whatever, your conditioning, whatever you want to call it, because Joseph Campbell talked about that in The Power of Myth, when he said, follow your bliss, and Bill Moyers, the interviewer, said to him, explain that. What do you mean by that? And he said, we all know what really we value, what really turns us on. And if you don't follow that, Joseph Campbell said, God help you. So, yeah, there's some hard times to that. And yes, picking a career in accounting is a lot less risky than picking a career in acting or in filmmaking or in dancing. Even worse, there's a time limit on that. But you don't know if you don't try. And I think that there's so many and very important things. The drummer drumming those drums, and then those just real quick flashbacks to his grandmother banging that spaghetti sauce spoon on the side of the pan. And when they asked him why did he stop, and he said he could have made up a lot of excuses and reasons, but maybe the best thing to do was not to have any reasons at all. It's what it was. And he stopped because he was already suffering from, the brain hemorrhage, brain cancer, or whatever it was, that tumor. And he didn't know, but the sound of that beat brought him to that place. And what was revived in that moment was where his heart really lived, what he truly loved. So I think it's just so important for young people to see this film. You've got to know thyself, and you've got to take a chance on, at least for a while, on what really turns you on. Or as Joseph Campbell said, if you don't follow your bliss, God help you. It's not going to turn out well for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm curious. I don't know if I've shared this with you, but I have this sort of belief that before people have kids, they should at least like take one big swing at something that they wanted to do.
Mhm.
Uh, because I, it feels like, from my vantage point, that the people that try to live vicariously through their kids are the ones that didn't take that shot. And then obviously that is very undue pressure on a kid.
Mhm.
And so if nothing else, of like just I don't know, I have this like ingrained belief that yeah, just try something, whatever it is, whether you succeed or fail, but at least you got it out of your system and you don't have to pass on that weight, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost a generational weight that gets passed on inadvertently. Um, one thing. I want to say about this because you're a filmmaker, you're a writer, you're a producer, a director, and you live in the world of creativity, and you help others, you counsel people with creativity. This is where your heart lives. Okay. Um, I'm not so sure my heart really ever lived in acting, but I didn't know any better because I was programmed from the time I was literally 4 years old. My mother put me to the University of Washington creative dramatics program. It was an experimental program. But I found out as time went by. But it's a big struggle, the arts, the creative, the creative world in general, whether it be music or writing, filmmaking, acting, it doesn't matter. It is it's a tough long shot, and not always the long shot, but mostly it's a tough long shot. And for people to stay in there, because I mean, for every part you get as an actor, you didn't get 15, on the auditions you went to, or more. So as you're struggling through this stuff, and I think this is all in this film. I mean, as you're struggling through, your dreams and your creativity and your dreams of being an artist and a creative, a performing artist or any form of artist, there's that saying that some neuroscientists came up with, your energy flows to where your attention goes. And there's no way you can argue with that statement. So in the struggle, your attention often goes to the odds. It goes to the rejection. It goes to, I didn't get financiers for my film, or I didn't get that part, and I dreamed of playing that part one day. We it's very important for artists and creative people to keep their focus on the love of it. Bring okay, so you're just struggling with the dynamics as Phil Stoltz says, universe one, which I learned from you. Um, you come back to the spiritual aspect of it. You come back to the love of it, and that will revive you. And in a sense, as Chuck was dying, he didn't know it yet. He heard that drum beat, and he went back to the love of it. And I think that when you walk away from that theater, you really remember those scenes. They, they they were at the essence of everything. The love for something that we do. And it can be accounting, it could be anything. It can be math, it can be anything. But when we lose track of the love of why we want to do this and why we're doing it, that's when, depression sets in, I think, and defeat.
Yeah, I agree. And I would even, this isn't part and parcel of the movie, but I would kind of extract that into a larger discussion point of, I think people don't even necessarily choose what they want. They just kind of let society really dictate that.
Hmm.
Whether it's the idea of, okay, I have to make money, what is in terms of success, like how do we define that? And there's an interesting question too that often gets asked, like if you could succeed at anything, what would you want to be? And I think that's a relatively idiotic question for the simple reason that if I could choose to be successful at anything, no matter what would I choose to be? Well, I'd try to choose a profession that's lazy and, whatever, I'd succeed at it. So, of course. So, I think the better version of that question is if you knew no matter what you did, you'd fail regardless, what would you still choose to do? And I think that's a much more honest and like that gives an honest answer of what you want to do in life.
Hmm.
And I would go after that.
Yeah, it's interesting you use this word be. What would you want to be?
Mhm.
In replacing it with what would you want to do? My best advice to anybody is if you want to choose something really profoundly sound and, for lack of a better word, spiritual, choose to be the best version of yourself that you can be. and the rest is going to come because we all can see authenticity from the fake. So become the best version of your authentic self, and I think you will have a more likely make the right choices. And if you start that young, hey,
Yeah.
as one counselor I had once said, it's a long road that knows no bend, no curve, no dip. Of course, these things are going to happen. Okay. But if you stay with, being truly, if you can find out truly who you are, Shakespeare
Yeah.
said it, to that own self be true. Take the chance on that because that is that is a beautiful creation. It's a perfect creation. All the overlay, all that stuff, it's not who we are. And certainly, this film, given how many dance scenes there were, I mean, he didn't know it in the beginning, but Chuck's heart lived in the dance. And I think again, I'm going to say it one more time. That's a metaphor for life. This life of ours is a dance. And
Yeah.
if you're going to stay in it, you might as well be having a good time because we all know the end. You know, I was doing some research recently on a client, a therapy client, and I thought, wow, this girl's a real Pollyanna. And it turns out I had that wrong. But anyway, I looked up on the Disney Channel Pollyanna, the film, 1960s film. Pollyanna got a bad rap by all of this because we look at people that we go, oh, he or she's a Pollyanna is a goody two shoes or something. But in fact, reviewing it, I was 10 years old at the time. And I've developed the same kind of bias against Pollyanna, the word Pollyanna myself, but it's actually very well done film. And the thing about Pollyanna is she comes in this town that's controlled by one very rich woman, and everybody's afraid to cross her. Everybody's afraid to be independent and think independently because, then you're done. But Pollyanna comes in here and she is basically teaching this town to look for the joy in any situation instead of looking to the dark side of it. And she goes to visit this woman that is complaining if you bring her chicken soup, she wanted um, beef soup. If you say it's sunny, she wanted it to rain that day. And there's a scene where she comes in and the undertaker is there and even taking measurements for the satin for her coffin. Uh, it's and she basically says, we're all going to die, but why don't you put your attention and focus on living instead of dying and the pain and the suffering? I mean, easier said than done, but that is really the message of that film. And I think that this celebration of our lives is one of the messages of this film as well. I'm not saying it's Pollyanna by any sense of the word, but it's a similar message. Go with the love. Go with what you love to do. Be reasonable about that, but don't ever lose the love of what you've chosen to do if you've made that choice. It's seemingly a hard thing to know thyself, as Shakespeare said, but it's really not. If you could cut through this collective dream that mankind's got, often which has to do with finances and wealth and money, Phil Schultz talks about that. He goes, I got a lot of famous, my client list looks like the who's who in the entertainment industry. And let me tell you something, it ain't going to do it for you. Because no matter how much money you have and how much success you have, how many people admire you, etc., you still are going to have to live with yourself. And I don't know. I think Stephen King really he hit his stride on this one. He
Yeah.
really tapped into so much of the essential human condition. And it's not a hard solution. You go, you look inside, and you know what you have a particular gift for that other people don't quite, as the Undertaker said, I think couldn't do what those other weathermen could do. So I chose to be an Undertaker. I did what I could do better. No, no, instinctively we know it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even Stephen King, right? Like his story um, is very exemplary, right? Like, I mean, the guy just literally wanted to write, and early on, yes, he's successful now, but he wrote whenever he wasn't working at whatever menial job he had, he was writing, and then eventually that became the career he could have. And now, I mean, what is it? Over 50 books? Maybe 60 at this point, if not more. And that doesn't include short stories and all that stuff. So,
Hmm?
yeah, talk
Yeah,
like he's a living example of
yeah,
following his gift.
yeah. He has a keen sense of observation of human beings and their dilemmas, et cetera, and their fears. You know, don't waste any more. I guess my issue about Pollyanna is don't waste any more time dying. Spend all your time living. That'll take care of itself in the end. And as you said at the beginning of this interview, if you died today, would you say, be at peace with that? Yeah, as long as you're true to yourself, it's a job well done. And we have to fit that into a very, very limited time frame, as Carl Sagan pointed out with his calendar of the universe, all put into 12 months, which comes up repeatedly in this film as well. So, yeah, I mean, to me, it's almost flawless, this film.
Before we wrap out, I want to talk about the aspect of death itself, because I'm fascinated by it for a number of reasons, but looking at this movie and kind of looking at, its text of it. So when Chuck dies, the universe ends, right? And so we could take that to be like, obviously he's dead,
When
everything's
Chuck dies, what did you say?
the universe ends, right? Um, and I say that because it's fascinating to me. Whenever someone dies in life, obviously we mourn them, but we have this sense of like how sad it is, almost like we try to do this dance, pun intended, of how sad it is for that person. But for them, it's over. For better or worse, it's over. The pain, if anything, is on us. We're left there to pick up the pieces. And so it's just, I don't know, it's just fascinating how we try to offload that pain, yet we're the ones reeling with it. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's interesting because in that last scene, when he sees himself as an older person laying in that hospital bed, and that heart monitor was the last thing to go. And I think the line was something like, "We don't disappear, like fade away like ghosts in movies. It happens all at once. The lights go out." And that's again the metaphor to the universe going out, and the teacher sitting with his ex-wife looking up, and bang, the North Star goes, bang, Mars goes. And the whole thing that we haven't talked about, which was a big deal in this film, is the multitudes within.
Yes.
All that stuff, all that we call experience and life, and all the people, all the places, and all the things we've learned, all the things that we've taught, all the things that we became good at or bad at, or it's all there. Those are the multitudes within. And when we go, seemingly, I can't say, I haven't gone yet, that universe disappears. And it disappears all at once. 1 minute, you're alive, and the next minute, you're gone. And that again could seem quite depressing because, in my therapeutic work, my worst fear is that I've spent, the last 32 years developing a system that I have not yet been able to convey to other people. So, and I think it's a very powerful and effective system. I call it the fastest system on earth. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not, but the idea that that is going to perish and disappear from history with me, that's a bit frightening, for me. It's not for me and my ego, but I think that I've developed something really profound. Unlike, Jackson Pollock may be gone or Van Gogh may be gone, but his paintings are not, you know, uh, with something that's an active living process like this. If I don't do something about that, and like I said, the runway is getting shorter for me. And I think that's important that we're all unique and there'll never be another one like us in the history of the entire universe. And we all have a contribution to make in this world. You know, Mike Flanagan is clearly making a contribution to film. You're making a contribution to creativity in film and writing, etc. And so be it. If it all disappears with us, it all disappears with us. The important thing is, how we affect the world around us while we're here. I think that's the most important thing. And that's our gift to the planet. And we should not, no matter how insignificant we are, whether we have a big name or apparently are obscure, you have a contribution to make. And make it with joy and make it with self-confidence. I mean, that's really, the theme of It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart, isn't it? I mean, I wished I'd never lived. Well, Clarence the Angel looks at that and goes, okay, let's have a look at that. Maybe that'll get me my wings. So then the rest of the movie for the next 30 minutes is this is what life would have been like if you hadn't been here.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the I contain multitudes part of that um, is essentially permission to be a lot of different things. So, I mean, it's interesting. You would think in a creative industry that there would be a lot of leeway to just try stuff, right? But everyone's like, oh no, you have to do this or this is the way. And I get questioned at every juncture. I remember after my second movie, someone very close and successful, not ignorantly, but from a kind place, were like, I think you should slow down and just do short films and really, do like maybe one a year. And I turned to him, I think I want to do an animated trilogy. And so I say all that because, and even this is not me self-aggrandizing, but recently I put out a self-made documentary called an auto documentary about my 20-year career. And no one, even my friends really understood, well, what is it for? And I said, I don't really know. It just is. It's for me and
I've,
whatnot. And so
I've seen it. Yeah, it's great.
so that I contain multitudes to me, even beyond just as a filmmaker or any other sort of moniker within the creative space, I'm a friend. I'm a patient. I'm a son. I'm like all these different things that I could go on, and you can and in some ways it can be summarized as, well, I am Phil, right? Like life of Phil, life of Chuck, life of Charles. Like we contain multitudes, just like, now, yes, you are a therapist. You used to be an actor, but there's, again, so many countless things that you've done that I'm not aware of, that you're probably not even aware of, right?
Right.
So, like, that's the multitudes for me. And so from as much as it is like can be a sad movie if you view it through a certain lens, but that it's a life affirming movie, quote, Um, to me, it's giving you permission, like go do it, and it's okay to be contradictory.
One of the big things that we're all programmed with and conditioned with is what I call the collective dream of mankind, from a spiritual viewpoint, is we're taught you're one of two things pretty much. You're a success or you're a failure. And I think that is just so destructive. It's so off the balance beam. What if there's a third and fourth and fifth options that you're not just a success or you're a failure, that you are you, and what makes you is these multitudes, that Walt Whitman was talking about. Um, if people could get beyond that, I'm not sure they usually need a little bit of help to do that, but bring your contribution, give us what you got, good, bad, or ugly. It doesn't matter because it's not a matter of whether you're a success or you're a failure. You are.
Well, sometimes it's funny. Let me see if you go along with this. Like, I like to extract it to its like logical conclusion and the silliness of it. So, like, let's say you're the fastest person on Earth, right? Okay. Well, so you're successful there, but you're not the slowest, so you're a failure at that. Also, you're not the best chef, so you're a failure at that. So now all of a sudden, all the list of things that you are not successful at is actually, thousands, if not millions times more, right? And it's like, see, you might be successful at one thing, but you look at all the things you're a loser at.
Mhm.
And I bring all that up not because like I'm advocating for such an exercise. It's more of let's just do away with the binaries and all this sort of thing. Like, generally as we've learned through I've learned certainly through my time with you, the only way to win the game is usually don't play it.
That's right. Um, I mean, there's a reason that that sign kept coming up, which is also something surreal, and it's not based in reality like most of the film, is thank you, Chuck, for 39 good years. Nobody knows what that means. I think, okay, was he a banker or what? Is he retiring? No, he's got 39 years on his dance card and then he's gone. And thank you, Chuck, for 39 good years, because clearly this person and this character in the movie, he's a good person. And he's curious and he's loving, etc., and he's loyal, etc. So he gave the planet, everybody and anybody he came in contact with 39 good years. And then it was over. So to me, that is really the best description of success. Be yourself, bring that to the table. Everyone has unique gifts everybody has a different style, and find out who you are and bring it to the table. And again, this film, it just encompassed so much of that. All of these things that you and I've been talking about in this last hour, it's all in there, and yeah, I don't know about life after death, and I don't know about consciousness after death. Haven't been there. But don't be so sure it all goes out. But certainly it goes out in this life the way we know it. You know, um, People don't really know who they are. And a lot of what we experience is when we don't get that job or we don't get that chance or we can't seem to find the right partner is egoistic wounds. Our ego is telling us, and of course the ego is formulated from other people's voices too, that you should have done this, you screwed up, you did that. You got to get that voice out because the ego is a false construct to begin with. You know, I mean, you might create something that you think is just wonderful, and every time you look at it, you go, I just think this is so wonderful. And everybody else, what do you like about that? It brings me something what we're all here for. and that's happiness. I think most people would say, why do they want to be rich? Because I think money will make me happy. Why do I want to have the right job? Because I think the right job will make me happy. Why do I want to find a loving partner? Because I think a loving partner will make me happy. And we can go on and on ad infinitum. I think the new car would make me happy. I think the boat would make me happy. I think international and public acclaim would make me happy. But all these things are outside of ourselves. So again, I'm going to relate it back into the life of Chuck. Where do you live? You live in the heart. And we are even taught, don't follow your heart, follow your mind. Your mind is there to preserve you. But I strongly disagree with this. I would say follow your heart and then follow your mind. But put the heart first because that's where true happiness lies. That which we hold, that's why we call it love. Main activity of the heart is love and be loved.
Yeah, I would agree. And I guess just as a final thought on everything, I often look at it this way of I make a singular choice, right? So you're talking about like lead with your heart. Um, for example, I filmed a movie in Colombia. A lot of people were confused. Why would you do that? Because I wanted to. That was the choice I made. And then I let my brain figure out the specifics of how do we pull this off. So that way the brain didn't get a choice. It just had to be an active participant in that choice.
I saw your film and I liked it. And my favorite joke about you making that film was when you said, "Yeah, I'm going to go to Colombia and make a film." And I said, "What's it about?" You go, "I don't know yet." So you had a location in search of a film rather than a script in search of a location. I find this incredibly filled with humor and entertainment. I do want to say one more thing about the life of Chuck. At
Sure.
the very last frame of the third act, which comes first, he's sitting there with his ex-wife, and he says to the girl, "Well, did you love each other?" "Yes, but we make better exes than we did husband and wife." So the very last frame, as the North Star goes out, Mars goes out, and they're staring, and you're hearing these booms come in ever increasing frequency from the universe. You know, things are going disappearing that we can't even see or are not being photographed. He reaches over with his hand and then he says something because she doesn't see him, and she reaches over and touches his hand and he says, "I love you." And again, the brilliance of Mike Flanagan. There isn't even a nanosecond of another frame after he says, "I love you." It almost like he cuts the "you" off of "I love you." Wow, this is what it's all about. In those last moments, even on our own deathbed, if we're still conscious, probably our last words will be, "I love you. I love. I am love. I love." I just think this film has got it all, Bill.
Yeah.
I think it's all there.
No, I love that. I'm glad my persistence allowed you to go see it. I don't know how active I was in that, but my ego will take some credit.
Yeah, well, I went and saw it because you recommended it to me. I had no idea. But it's not going to be in the theaters much longer, but it will come out like all films do. There will be a medium you can watch it in, and the recommendation doesn't change. Whatever you do, go see this film before you grow too old.
Yeah.
Now is the time to see it. Now is the time to let your life. This film has the power to truly change lives if you take it to heart. And
Absolutely.
I can't say that about all films by any means.
Well, very well said. Thank you again for those listening. We appreciate you, and we'll try to do more of these in the future. If there's film recommendations that you think would be fun, comment down below. Also, by all means, Yeah, let Chuck know that you'd love to have him for more episodes, and that'll be nice ammo for me to be like, hey, see, people want you
Let's
back.
do it. Let's do it because you are a tremendous recommender of films. I thought at the beginning when I sat in the theater, okay, because you said, well, it's a little bit confusing at the very beginning because of the way it's shot, but it all comes beautifully together at the end. And I was sitting there and I was tired and I went, I hope he didn't screw me up on this one. No, in no way did you do it. Did you screw me up? It is just such a great gift. Thank you. Thank Mike Flanagan, the cast. What a magnificent group of actors, and their performances are, I think, a really direct reflection of his skill, Mike Flanagan's skill. And I think if I was in Mike Flanagan's head right now, after his body of work in scary and horror type films, he is sitting there like the cat that ate the canary and thinking, I really nailed it this time.
Yeah, no, he's absolutely fantastic. And for you, if people are curious, charlesmccon.com is the website. I'll link to it in the description, so that way you don't have to get your pad out to write it down. It's all there for you. You can connect with him that way, learn about more of the work that he does, and we did other interviews. I even shared, 10-minute clip of what a session looks like, all that good stuff. So it's all there for you if you're curious. Thank you so much. We appreciate you tuning in. Hope to see you for the next one.
Thank you, Phil.